AAMplify, a podcast series by the Association of Accounting Marketing. I'm Carrie Steffen, president and co-founder of the Whetstone Group, and I'm very pleased to welcome all of you to our session today. Joining me today is John Reisman. John is the president and founder of Sales Driven Services, a lead generation company that works with professional service firms to add revenue to the top line through lead generation. Welcome, John, to our program today.
Great to be here, Carrie.
Today's session is going to address telemarketing as part of your firm's overall business development efforts. And John, I think telemarketing is one of those concepts that's a little intimidating for a lot of CPA firms, primarily because I think they don't really understand what it is. So I'd like you to start today by helping to demystify it for us. Can you talk a little bit about, in your mind, what telemarketing is and how it fits into a firm's marketing and sales strategy?
Absolutely, love to. That's a great question to start with, Carrie. Telemarketing, the reason why it's an intimidating term for most firms is because everybody hates it, including me, by the way. Telemarketing is not the right term. It's actually lead generation, and you've got to put it all into perspective. When you do sales, when you do marketing, most firms think of that as one thing, and it's not. Marketing is one-to-many, as many have always said, and sales is one-to-one, just like their professional services. When you ask any firm out there, what's the most important thing you deliver to your clients? We deliver the best service there is. Well, service and sales both begin with an S, and they're both one-to-one functions, and lead generation is just like marketing, a very valuable component in the development of the pipeline.
I think that's a really interesting point because there are a lot of firms that use the terms marketing and sales interchangeably. So making sure that there's a distinction between those two and then understanding really how the lead generation process that you do fits, I think is a really important concept for firms to understand. What are the top 3 success factors in implementing a telemarketing program or a lead generation program, as you refer to it, for a firm?
Number one is dedication and commitment of the individuals involved. Again, that's a team effort. It's marketing, it's sales, it's everybody that's involved. It's anybody who's a rainmaker, a partner, whatever you want to call them in the firm that's generating the business. I think another key factor in that is personal involvement of those individuals. Having skin in the game, that is very critical. And last is true communication. Mm-hmm. And Carrie, communication is real simple. No offense, doesn't matter what the client thinks, doesn't matter what John Reisman, thinks. All that matters is what the prospect thinks. And that's where professional lead generation differentiates itself from telemarketing, providing real live communication.
Do you think there are any special considerations for CPA firms as opposed to maybe some of the other types of companies that you work with that marketers should be mindful of if they're considering this for their firms?
Yeah, the number one thing is they want organic growth. There's many ways to grow a firm, but number one, that the firm actually wants organic growth. It's much different than growth through acquisition. I think that's key. The leadership commitment that we talked about, where the leaders in the firm really understand what growth means, and growth is sales, that's very critical out there too. In my opinion, those are the 2 key factors. So.
And I love what you said at the beginning, or what you have talked about on your website when I've looked at that, and some of the other materials that you use to talk about this with firms, and that it's top line growth. And so, when firms are focused on growth, I think they have to be recognizing, or they have to recognize that this is really about adding to the top line. So this is something that can produce exponential results for them if they are implementing it in the right way. And I think that should be sort of a business case in and of itself for a lot of firms. And if you have firms that are in that mindset of being high growth, I think that's probably critical. But what else can marketers do if they have partners who are interested in growth? They're interested in that top line growth. What else can marketers do to sell this idea that telemarketing makes sense, and that it's, again, for those partners who are sort of uncomfortable with that idea, what else can they use as their sort of what kind of ammunition can you give them to sell that internally?
We can give them a little bit of ammunition. Number one, just like firms invest in technical CPE, they should be investing a little bit in sales too, to develop their senior managers, their principals, or partners that aren't pulling their weight. And that happens across the whole spectrum of all the firms. Number two, I think looking at the types of firms at the types of vendors that do this, make sure you choose one that has expertise, willing to do a short-term contract that has a pilot program, proof of concept, whatever you want to call it. But a real simple sell for any marketing person in any firm, any business development person, anybody, any partner in charge, pick as they call them, a partner in charge of development growth. You look around the room and ask, who in the firm is making 300 prospect calls each and every month? And that usually sells or gets their attention.
Absolutely, because they sure aren't doing that, are they?
They know they should do it, they want to do it, they're just not doing it. That's right.
And so I guess sort of along those lines then, tell me about relevancy. Why do you think this is relevant for CPA firms? I think probably, one of the first reasons is for what you just said, because partners are clearly not going to make those calls and, don't have the capacity, maybe don't have the skill set to be able to do that. But why is this so relevant for CPA firms, this tactic?
Well, first of all, it works, period. If you have someone who's dedicated, a dedicated caller, a dedicated phone number, a dedicated email address, someone who's dedicated to making the process work, and it is a process, it works. We've done over hundreds of these in the accounting profession, successfully, by the way. The projects that are out there, by the way, not the projects, the prospects that are out there are overwhelmed with information today. They are bombarded with social media, robocalling, all of the bad things, not bad things, all of the marketing things and good things and bad things like telemarketing out there. They are inundated with it. And believe it or not, where there's a personal follow-through on a phone call, that's very rare today. It's been neglected lately. And it is something that is very well accepted out there, particularly for small markets.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And I think that is one of the first ways that firms can start to build trust with those prospects, is to be able to follow through with a personal contact like that, so that, a prospect knows that they're important and that, there's somebody there that's willing to talk with them. And so I think that that's a really good point and a really good differentiator, if you will, for your kind of services versus a lot of the other services that are not services even, but a lot of the other tactics that marketers are using that maybe aren't quite as personalized as we'd like to see them be. Nothing is the same as a voice-to-voice connection. And so I think that does stand out in a very crowded marketplace. You're exactly right.
That is exactly correct.
Yeah.
It's that one missing link. It's that personal touch. All the marketing options are very important to do, the social media and everything else. Yep. All of that is important. But somebody still has to make a phone call and set a meeting with a decision maker and have that decision maker qualified by saying, yes, I want to talk to that person.
Absolutely. So obviously you have a lot of experience doing this with CPA firms. You have a lot of experience doing this with other types of professional service firms as well. So what are some of the more common mistakes? We've talked about some of the success factors and, some of the things that we need to do the right way, but what are some common mistakes or some things that maybe we'd like to avoid with our programs?
Number one is making sure you put a discipline in place, a discipline in time, commitment of that time, a discipline and expectations associated with it. Some firms think it should be a silver platter. The referral business is the best business you could possibly have. It's also the worst business you can have. The reason why it's the worst, Carrie, is real simple. You rely on somebody else to think of you at that moment in time versus you taking a proactive role and letting them know you're thinking of them through a telephone call, a personal telephone call. That's the only difference. Referrals are the best because they're half sold for you. Most firms don't understand the amount of work that's involved, commitment and time and dedication towards what it takes to win.
Let's talk a little bit about the technology aspect. I know that technology is a topic that a lot of AIM members are interested in and using it in a variety of different ways to support their marketing and sales efforts. What kind of technology, or how does technology play a role in your process?
It's a very critical role. Technology not only helps you in the data cleansing aspect, when you're making calls or doing the targeting, which is even before making the calls, the targeting is everything that's public information is junk out there. Doesn't matter which one you pull from. I don't care what it is. It's outdated the minute it gets. The best targeted lists are ones that are conferences, ones that your partners are speaking at. Now, your partner becomes a rock star when they have those conferences and they're the keynote speaker or they're the breakout session speaker. They are now considered a rock star. They don't know that yet, but that is the fact. The key is to follow through on the not only pre-conference calling, but post-conference calling. Those are some of the critical factors out there. Data cleansing technology plays in. Calendar invites. As simple as that might sound, when you put a calendar invite on someone's calendar, both the prospect and the partner, it's amazing how that call actually takes place and gets done. Calendar invites, great technology. It sounds simple, but keeping things simple usually is what definitely keeps things moving forward. And then last but not least, reporting, of course. So.
What kinds of approaches are you seeing with your CPA firm clients? Are they doing anything that's, maybe a little different than they did 5 years ago? Or is there anything as far as the approach that marketers need to understand and incorporate when they're planning their projects?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is they've got to understand prospects, which are going to be turned into clients, are really looking for the subject matter experts to talk to. It's okay to have a professional set that meeting up for you. It's okay to have a business developer go out there and be part of that meeting, or even further qualify that meeting if that's what the lead generation caller is doing, to set that up for the business developer to pre-qualify for the partner. But they really want subject matter experts. The narrower the targeting, the more successful they are. Like we talked about, rock star status. If you're a speaker at an AI CPA conference, at a manufacturing conference, whatever the conference is, those are the ones where you're going to get the best possible hits to win. Geography is always the case, size of the company, all the data points that we always look for, those are common. But really, narrowing the target focus is probably one of the best things you can do.
So I guess I'd like to sort of end our conversation today with one of those topics that I think is probably of most interest to listeners, and that's about best practices. And what are some of the best practices, not only with the CPA firms that you work with, but also with some of the other industries that you work with that accounting firms may want to take into consideration as they're planning their projects?
The best practices that I can recommend is, first of all, discipline, like we talked about. Discipline for a pipeline that's a continuous pipeline, continuously adding to the pipeline, no stops and starts. Targeting, narrower focused targeting, and then improvements within all of those segments, making sure you get, number two, second most important thing is the prospect feedback. Like what we said, it doesn't matter what I think or you think or anybody else thinks. It's what are we hearing the prospects say? And is there a sense of urgency of why they should be talking? Creating a sense of urgency is very important in professional services. We deal with accounting firms, engineering firms, technology firms, and the key driver to getting appointments, developing work with new prospects is creating a sense of urgency behind it. Today's prospects, yes, they expect a relationship, but the relationship doesn't win deals. What does the prospect expect today? Performance. They're looking for performance from the firm that they're going to hire, and they're welcome to listen to that, or they're open to listen to that. That's what they want to hear. That's why subject matter experts are important. And last but not least, if you choose to do a lead generation and you create a sense of urgency behind that, make sure you qualify the lead, make sure you secure the lead, which again, that's using technology and getting that invite and making sure you have what we have like a 5-touch process, making sure there's a process behind it and continuation of that process, and then close for that meeting. Set that date and put it on a calendar. You will be more successful. You'll have more prospect meetings. And when I ask clients, if we get you 50, 60, 70 qualified meetings in a year, how many of those can you close and how much business can you sign from it? And if they close 1 or 2 or 3, they're superstars instead of rock stars.
That's great advice. And I appreciate you closing with that, because I think that it's been very helpful for you to outline the entire process from the beginning to, targeting prospects and using data the right way and making sure that you're getting the right kind of data to, having that discipline to work through the process, and then hopefully ultimately working toward the close, because that's what we ultimately all would like, isn't it?
It's what it pays the bills. And number one thing, if there's only one piece of advice I could give everybody on this podcast, just follow through on what you're going to do.
That's great advice. Thank you so much for joining us today, John. It's been a lot of fun talking with you. You shared a lot of helpful information for our marketing professional audience, so I really appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you, and continued success to everybody on the line.
Thank you. This wraps up another episode of Amplify. Please watch for additional webcasts from the Association for Accounting Marketing coming in the next few months. And always remember to aim high.
Listening, we're always